What makes a book dangerous? Not dangerous in the way a weapon is dangerous. Not because it can strike or burn or explode, but because it can linger, because it can plant an idea in the mind that refuses to leave, because it can change the way a person sees the world. And once that shift happens, there is no simple way back. Across history, there have been texts that were not merely controversial, but feared. Manuscripts locked behind iron clasps, pages hidden in monasteries, volumes whispered about in libraries like they were sleeping animals. Some were banned for heresy, others for politics, some simply because the wrong people were reading them. And then there are the stranger ones, books that sit at the edge of belief and doubt. Books that claim to offer more than stories, instructions, rituals, maps of invisible worlds. Whether or not they truly held power is almost beside the point. What matters is that people thought they might. It often begins the same way. A forgotten archive, a sealed box, a dusty room where time seems thicker than air. Someone opens a cover and finds words that feel too deliberate, too intimate, as if written for one reader centuries later. The past is full of discoveries like this, but some discoveries carry a particular weight. In 1648, as war rolled through Europe, Swedish forces seized treasures from a monastery in Bohemia. Among them was an enormous manuscript, so heavy it took 2 men to lift, bound in leather, reinforced with wood and iron. It looked less like a book and more like a monument. Later, it would be called the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. The name did not come only from superstition. It came from what was inside, a full-page portrait of Satan, staring out with an unsettling calm, framed in red borders like a doorway. The legend is almost too perfect. A monk, condemned for breaking vows, begs for mercy. He promises to create the largest book ever written, to glorify God. He is given one night, and when morning comes, the book is complete. 600 pages, one flawless hand, no corrections, no hesitation. Scholars say it would have taken decades, so the human mind fills the gap with something else. A pact, a bargain, a price. Whether or not the story is true, the feeling remains that this manuscript is not simply a Bible. It is a collision of devotion and darkness, medicine and exorcism, astronomy and spells, a library of contradictions. And perhaps that is why such books haunt us, not because they prove anything supernatural, but because they reveal something deeply human, our hunger to know what lies beyond the edge of certainty. Over the centuries, institutions have tried to contain that hunger. Churches burned texts, monarchs outlawed ideas, libraries restricted access, pages vanished, entire chapters were erased as if knowledge itself could be unmade. But suppression has always had an unintended effect. It turns books into legends. It makes the forbidden feel luminous. A banned manuscript becomes more than paper. It becomes a symbol of curiosity, fear, rebellion, longing. And so we are left with a question that echoes across time. Are these books dangerous because of what they contain, or because of what we bring to them? In the chapters ahead, we will travel through 10 such texts, manuscripts once hidden, hunted, whispered about in vaults and catacombs, not to glorify them, not to sensationalize them, but to understand what they represent. The boundary between knowledge and obsession, between discovery and dread, between the stories we tell about the past and the silence we build around what we cannot explain. Because sometimes the most haunting thing about a forbidden book is not the ink. It is the mirror it holds up to the reader. And once you look into that mirror, you may begin to wonder how many doors have been closed in the name of safety, and what might still be waiting behind them. It began with silence. In the catacombs beneath a French fortress, behind a wall that wasn't supposed to exist, a group of guards uncovered something wrapped in cloth, soaked in myrrh, and sealed with red wax. It wasn't gold, it wasn't a weapon, it was a book. The year was 1521, and the place was the Bastille, a prison already stained with whispers of secrets. But this secret did not stay quiet for long. The book was delivered to an inquisitor. Days later, he vanished. His chambers were found in disarray, the book gone. What resurfaced over the centuries would carry many names, but one echoed louder than the rest: Le Dragon Rouge, the Red Dragon. It was not simply a grimoire. It was, in its own strange way, a contract, a guide for forging allegiance with forces most people only name in fear. The text opens with an invocation addressed not to a saint, nor to God, but directly to Lucifer. Not as a metaphor, not as a warning, but as a conversation. Its tone is what unsettles readers most. Not frenzied, not poetic, but calm, precise, like a teacher instructing a student. The rituals within are unnervingly specific. The ink must be mixed with myrrh and goat's blood. The blade for carving sigils must be dipped in the same. The circle of protection must be drawn with bone dust and sulfur, each step calibrated, each diagram measured. The book names 4 infernal agents: Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth, and Orient, each aligned with an elemental force: air, fire, water, earth. The text does not suggest worship. It offers command, but at a price. To proceed is to offer loyalty in blood. There is a section, simply titled The Pact, that instructs the reader to write their desires in their own blood, addressed to Lucifer, and burn the contract in a black candle made from animal fat and ash taken from a desecrated altar. Then, it says, wait in darkness. No promise is made about what will arrive, just that something will. Throughout history, fragments of the Red Dragon appeared in the hands of those seeking influence: mystics, rogue scholars, desperate men on the edge of belief. Most who claimed ownership came to strange ends: hallucinations, seizures, unexplained fires. In the 18th century, the Catholic Church declared the book heretical and sent agents to locate and destroy every known copy. Some were burned, but not all. In Paris, 1895, a former theology professor was found dead in his home. In his journals, he wrote of attempting the ritual, but halted after hearing a voice beneath the floorboards, not in warning, but in recognition, as if it had been waiting. The Red Dragon is not a book of seduction. It offers no illusions of salvation. It does not comfort. It instructs. And therein lies its danger, because tools, by nature, are neutral. But in the wrong hands, neutrality becomes complicity. What makes Le Dragon Rouge so persistent is not just its content, it's its clarity, its refusal to veil intent behind metaphor, its cold logic. It suggests a terrifying possibility that power is not hidden, but offered, freely, systematically, if you know how to ask. And if that's true, then perhaps the question is not why someone would read such a book, but why, knowing what it might cost, they would read it a second time. In the shadows of forgotten catacombs, in pages stained by time and fire, the Red Dragon whispers still. Not seduction, not madness, just a choice. And the echoing question: what would you trade for everything you've ever wanted. Genoa, 1750. In the narrow alleys where merchants and mystics once crossed paths, a book surfaced like a storm from a forgotten sea. Bound in cracked leather, with no author's name, only a title pressed faintly into the cover, Le véritable Dragon Rouge, the true red dragon. But this was no duplicate of the earlier manuscript. This one was colder, more deliberate, less packed, more blueprint. It came to be known as the Grand Grimoire. Among those who studied it, or tried to, the verdict was nearly unanimous. This was not a guide for contacting spirits. It was an engineering manual for summoning Lucifer himself and compelling him to obey, not with worship, with force. The book's structure is disturbingly logical. It divides the work into two parts, preparation and execution. The former reads like a recipe for impossibility, precise lunar phases, a blade forged from meteoric iron, and a ritual triangle drawn with ash from the robe of an exhumed priest. The second part is worse. Here lie the incantations, the seals, the contracts, not in poetic language, but in a strange mix of Latin, Hebrew, and ciphered French. Lines so carefully constructed that they feel less written and more etched, as if carved into the fabric of something older than language. Unlike most grimoires, this one does not treat Lucifer as a deity or devil to be feared. It refers to him like a subject in negotiation, an entity bound by hierarchy. The summoner is told not to beg, but to command. Through the so-called Covenant of Solomon, a divine hierarchy that supposedly places the righteous practitioner above the spirits themselves. According to the text, if this authority is claimed properly, even Lucifer must obey. But there is a condition. The ritual must be sustained for 13 consecutive nights. Each invocation deeper than the last, and each failure punished. Historically, few have dared to try. Fewer still have claimed success. One name stands out: Jean-Michel Ardo, a French occultist who, in 1932, announced he had completed the invocation. He was found dead in his apartment days later. No signs of struggle, no wounds, just eyes entirely black. His journals, hidden beneath a floorboard, were filled with phonetic versions of the incantations, rewritten perhaps for someone else to speak, or for something else to hear. The Grand Grimoire became a target. The Catholic Church listed it among the most forbidden of texts. Copies were seized, burned, or locked away, and yet it endured. Whispers of its influence appear in Haiti, where it blended with Vodou rituals. In Rome, where secret copies reportedly vanished from the Vatican's own library. Even in Renaissance Europe, where alchemists studied its structure, not to summon, but to understand. What makes the Grand Grimoire different is not just the depth of its rituals, it is its tone. This is not a book of mystery, it is a book of control. Its confidence is unsettling. There is no uncertainty in its pages. No if, only when. It does not ask the reader to believe. It assumes they already do. And for those who approach it, not with fear, but with calculation, it offers something darker than temptation. It offers procedure. If the legends are true, if somewhere, sometime, someone followed its steps to the end, then the question is not whether it works, but whether it ever stopped working. Because the promise of the Grand Grimoire is not chaos. It is order, built atop something ancient. And like any machine, once set in motion, it may not be so easily shut down. What if power could be summoned, not as miracle, but as inevitability? And what if the only thing holding it back was your willingness to finish the ritual? The wind off the Normandy coast carries a certain chill, even in summer. A chill that settles not in the skin, but somewhere deeper. In 1407, that wind blew through the stone halls of Mont Saint-Michel Abbey, a fortress of faith perched atop the tides. A monk, tasked with transcribing forbidden manuscripts, vanished from his quarters without a trace. No sign of struggle, no note, just a soot-blackened codex left on his desk. Its title was Liber Desperit, the Book of Spirits. It was unlike anything in the Abbey's collection. Bound in animal hide, the pages inked in a reddish-black hue that oxidized over time. The text wasn't filled with prayers or theological arguments. It was a directory, 46 entries, each one the name of a presence not catalogued by any known religious order. Not angels, not demons, simply called those who are missing. Missing from where? The book never says. Each spirit was described with surgical clarity. A name, a sigil, a planetary alignment, and a set of symptoms the summoner might experience: bleeding from the eyes, loss of speech, shadows that mimic movement. The rituals required no chants, only tones, specific frequencies, to be sung, hummed, or played, each one meant to pierce the veil between thought and form. If misaligned, the spirit would arrive incomplete, and it would remain. Summoning required more than sound. It demanded blood, not just any blood, ancestral. The practitioner was instructed to trace their star lineage under a fixed zodiac and draw their own blood at the matching lunar hour. That blood, mixed with crushed nightshade, became the ink that completed the glyph. Where this book came from remains a mystery. Some scholars trace its roots to suppressed Iberian texts, confiscated during the Albigensian Crusade. Others believe it emerged from early proto-Kabbalistic rites. But what unsettles researchers most is not where it came from. It's that versions of the book, handwritten, incomplete, often hidden, have appeared across France, Spain, and Italy, all containing the same 46 names, the same sigils, the same instructions. No known contact, no shared source, just the same dark inventory, repeating like a buried memory. The Church declared Liber Desperit heretical. Monks who studied it reported apparitions, not ghosts, but silhouettes that moved like men and cast no light. One chronicler wrote that even in midsummer, the book drew cold, 43 degrees, always. In 1482, Dominican inquisitors ordered every known copy destroyed. But destruction, as history shows, often invites rebirth. In 1701, a version was found bricked inside the walls of the Château de Montségur, the last stronghold of the Cathars. It was written in code on animal vellum, the ink later found to contain high levels of human iron. The most chilling detail: the book offers no promises, no rewards, no salvation. It does not protect. It does not warn. It simply lists names not meant to be spoken, glyphs that respond to blood, frequencies that don't just summon, they awaken. And if these entities are indeed missing, then someone, somewhere, was trying to bring them back. What if the veil between worlds is not guarded by angels or sealed by heaven? What if it is held together only by silence? And what happens when a name is spoken that was never meant to be remembered? Egypt, 14th century. A German traveler named Abraham of Würzburg makes a pilgrimage not for gold, not for conquest, but for wisdom. In his writings, he claims to have found it, not in temples or libraries, but in the presence of a man called Abramelin, a recluse, a magician, a transmitter of something that was not a religion, but a system. Centuries later, in 1897, an English occultist named Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers would publish an English translation of that system under the title The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. Its pages held no quick spells, no flashy promises. What it offered was far more unsettling: transformation. At the heart of the book lies a single purpose: to make contact with one's holy guardian angel, a being said to dwell beyond language, beyond form, beyond even belief. But the path is brutal. The operation requires 6 lunar months of ritual solitude, daily invocations, no meat, no indulgence, no company. A sacred chamber must be built, pure, silent, undisturbed, where prayers are offered at dawn, noon, and dusk. Only after this purging of the self can the practitioner begin the second phase, the summoning and binding of demonic entities. Not to worship, to control. The book lists names: Lucifer, Astaroth, Leviathan, each commanding legions of spirits. But unlike other grimoires, the Book of Abramelin does not suggest bargaining. The magician, having united with the divine counterpart of their soul, is meant to rule. Through language, through geometry, through intention. Word squares, palindromic symbols arranged in precise patterns, form the basis of control. They are not incantations, they are mechanisms. Keys. The stakes are high. Failure to complete the initial purification, the text warns, results in psychic unraveling. Visions that do not end. Dreams that bleed into waking. Shadows that remember you. One 17th century margin note, scribbled in a trembling hand, reads, "He saw the face of something not meant to see us." The book's reputation grew and darkened. In 1900, Aleister Crowley attempted the full ritual at Boleskine House in Scotland. He abandoned it halfway through. What followed were reports of voices, cold spots, and sudden violence. Later owners of the house described similar disturbances. The house burned in 2015 under mysterious circumstances. But the most puzzling detail? No two versions of the Book of Abramelin are the same. The word squares shift. The rituals change. The names rearrange. Some scholars argue these discrepancies are due to transcription errors. Others believe they are intentional, that the book rewrites itself, or worse, that it rewrites us. Today, few dare to attempt the full operation, and those who do rarely speak of what follows. Not because of secrecy, because of something harder to define. Maybe awe, maybe regret. Because if the holy guardian angel is real, a being so deeply connected to one's essence that contact transforms reality, then so too are its opposites, the voices we bind, the forces we command, the intelligences we disturb, and perhaps, once disturbed, they remember. In a world of instant answers and shallow rituals, the Book of Abramelin stands apart. It does not offer convenience. It demands transformation. And like all transformations, it leaves something behind. What part of yourself must you erase to meet the part that sees everything? Munich, 1990. In a sealed archival box marked Cod Lat 49, deep in the Bavarian State Library, a curator opened a book that had not been touched in over 100 years. It was bound in dark leather, its vellum pages dense with Latin text and diagrams drawn by hand. There was no title on the cover, but its contents would quickly earn it a new one. The Munich Manual of Demonic Magic. Scholars gave it a more formal name, Liber Incantationum, Exorcismorum et fascinationem variarum. But the true nature of the book needed no translation. It was a manual, a grim, methodical compendium of demonic rituals, not mystical allegories, not poetic metaphors. Instructions, direct, detailed, and unsettlingly precise. Unlike the structured elegance of the Key of Solomon or the celestial symbolism of the Picatrix, the Munich manual reads like a criminal case file compiled by someone who knew what they were doing or had seen it done. The book categorizes 35 spirits by name. Each entry includes the time of summoning, the required offerings, the atmospheric signs that signal arrival, and the symptoms of contact, hallucinations, nausea, blood anomalies. One spirit, Andralis, is said to arrive with wind that speaks in rhyme and demands the blood of a silent beast. The rituals are not requests, they are interrogations. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the manual. The demons are not summoned for worship or power, but for information. Each invocation is followed by blank fields, left open for the practitioner to record answers to questions that read like riddles from a forgotten world. Where lies the silver tongue of St. Maurice? Who guards the northern gate when the stars go black? What moves in silence between two mirrors? No answers are provided, only the space for them. And that space speaks volumes. The implication is chilling. Someone used this book not just to contact, but to extract, to conduct interviews with entities from the other side of language. The design of the manuscript suggests layers of protection, marginal symbols repeat throughout, collapsed hexagrams and double-ringed crosses believed to block auditory contagion. Several pages are stained, not with ink, but with what appears to be wax, oil, and dried iron-rich fluid. Preservationists refused DNA testing for ethical reasons. The Church banned the manuscript in the 16th century, but instead of burning it, they locked it away, first in a Jesuit college, later transferred quietly to Munich under ambiguous circumstances. When it re-emerged in modern times, interest spiked, and so did caution. In 2002, a Czech theologian claimed to have tried a minor ritual. He reported a rip in the light, followed by 3 days of aphasia and insomnia. He never published his account. He withdrew from public life entirely. Digital scans of the book briefly appeared on a university server, then vanished. Access today requires 2 archivists and a security guard. Even among seasoned scholars, no one asks twice, because the Munich manual doesn't feel like a relic. It feels like an open door. And those blank response fields, they suggest something worse than danger. They suggest a dialogue, one that may not be over. If you could ask a question of something not meant to answer, what would you want to know? And are you certain you'd want to hear the reply? Cairo, 1921. At a private auction held in a crumbling villa overlooking the Nile, a weathered Arabic manuscript changed hands quietly. No provenance, no title on the cover, but the interior was unmistakable. Nearly 400 pages of tightly packed text, a fusion of Arabic, Latin, and arcane symbols. Astrological tables, planetary diagrams, rituals that blurred the line between magic and science. It was a copy of Gayat al-Hakim, known in the West as the Picatrix. Unlike other grimoires obsessed with demons or pacts, Picatrix is different. It doesn't promise to summon anything. It promises transformation, not of spirits, of reality. Scholars believe it was compiled in 10th or 11th century Al-Andalus, drawing from Greek, Persian, and Indian sources now long lost. The manuscript reads like a metaphysical operating system, dense, mechanical, yet strangely poetic. Its core premise: every planet emits a unique essence, and that essence can be aligned, harvested by the mind. If the rituals are followed precisely, thought itself becomes an instrument. Perception becomes a tool. The world reshapes in response. This is not metaphor. The Picatrix treats consciousness as something measurable, influenceable. It offers procedures, memory enhancement chambers built on geometric grids, incense mixtures for invoking Mars, mirrors that reflect the true name of a soul. One section outlines the animation of idols, statues infused with life through planetary exposure. Built of wax, lead, and resins, they are to be left under celestial influence for 40 days. If successful, they speak. Once. Then they must be destroyed. Failure to do so, the book warns, results in a severing. Dreams unravel, and the mind begins to invert. This is where the Picatrix becomes most unnerving. It does not speak of gods or devils. It speaks of forces, of frequencies, of systems waiting for the right key. Even more provocative is how its ideas echo through time. Though written a millennium ago, the text describes something that modern neuroscience is only beginning to articulate: the plasticity of thought, the power of symbols, the effect of intention on cognition. It feels eerily ahead of its time. Too ahead. Pope Gregory IX called it a machine disguised as scripture and banned it shortly after its Latin translation. Yet the book never vanished. It passed from court astrologers in Renaissance Italy to secret societies in Prague, to Victorian occultists in England. There are whispers it reached even further. In 2006, a leaked intelligence report claimed a recovered copy of the Picatrix was being analyzed for its potential use in cognitive warfare. Experiments in manipulating belief and perception through symbolic saturation. The claim was denied. The scans were erased, but interest did not fade, because Picatrix does not offer power in the usual sense. No demons, no blood, no flame, just awareness. And the terrifying suggestion that everything we experience, every joy, every fear, every moment of clarity, might be shaped not by fate, but by alignment of thought, of sound, of will. It asks a simple, haunting question: what if the world is not as it is, but as we think it to be? And if so, who has been thinking it into place before us? London, 1888. In the private library of a deceased British occultist, a strange book was discovered, locked with iron clasps and bound in cracked calfskin. The pages, aged and brittle, were written in a mixture of Latin and Hebrew, their diagrams drawn with obsessive precision. Its title, when translated, was simple: The Key of Solomon, Clavicula Salomonis Regis, the Book of the King. Of all the grimoires said to descend from ancient times, this one loomed the largest, not for its darkness, but for its control. It did not beg spirits, it commanded them. Legend claimed that Solomon, the biblical king known for his wisdom, once imprisoned 72 demons in a brass vessel, binding them with divine authority. This book, it was said, contained the procedures he used, rituals precise enough to be followed by others if they were pure enough to endure the process. The Key of Solomon is divided into 2 books. The first is Purification, 30 days of ritual cleansing, abstaining from meat, prayers aligned with lunar cycles, complete isolation. Only after this was the practitioner allowed to begin drawing the ritual circles, not just any circles, These were geometric constructs inscribed with names of angels, planetary glyphs, and ancient sigils, carved with a silver blade onto virgin parchment made from a goat, born under the hour of Jupiter, sacrificed without spilling blood. These are not symbols of faith. They are requirements. Miss even one, and the book warns the ritual will reverse. The second book contains the spirits themselves, infernal, celestial, each with seals, names, and functions. They offer no forgiveness, only tasks. The power to find treasure, distort memory, manipulate dreams, or extract secrets. Each one demands a price. But the magician, if properly prepared, is to offer none. The spirit must obey, not through fear, but through hierarchy. One ritual includes the mirror of acknowledgement, a device used to verify a spirit's truth. The mirror is to be buried after 3 uses. Why? Because, the text warns, sometimes the reflection stays behind. The book is exacting. Wind direction, planetary hour, humidity levels. Every environmental detail is treated as critical. Misalignment may corrupt the entity, sir, or worse, allow it to remain after dismissal. For centuries, the Key of Solomon passed through hands both revered and reviled. Renaissance scholars referenced it. Alchemists copied it. Aleister Crowley built entire systems atop its structure. But the oldest versions, the ones written before translation, are scarce. Some say a Hebrew original once existed, with even more diagrams, including one said to mirror star charts only visible once every 144 years. The British Library houses a version, Harley MS 3981, though key pages remain redacted. Another copy, some claim, is bound in human skin and locked beneath the Vatican. Neither has been publicly confirmed. The appeal of the Key of Solomon is not its promises, it is its design. It reads less like a spiritual text and more like a manual, a set of procedures for commanding the unseen. It does not ask the reader to believe. It assumes they are already willing. And it warns, not with curses, but with consequences. Because this is not a book of desire. It is a book of structure. And what it teaches is chilling in its simplicity. Even evil can be bound, not by love, but by geometry. What if salvation isn't about surrendering to the divine, but learning how to speak the language of power more precisely than the forces that oppose you? And if that's true, who exactly holds the pen? Venice, 1629. A Jesuit scholar stationed at a quiet chapel outside the city was visited by a traveling monk. The monk wore no emblem, carried no name, and gave only one warning as he handed over a book. Do not open it under a roof. The scholar dismissed the warning. That night, neighbors reported howling from the chapel library. By dawn, the scholar was dead. His eyes were black. His lips fused. His hands still clutched the book. It bore the name Liber Geratus Honori, the Book of Honorius. Though attributed to the shadowy figure Honorius of Thebes, a magician whose existence remains unproven, the book's origins seem to stretch beyond the boundaries of medieval legend. Unlike other grimoires that dance between Christian symbolism and pagan ritual, this text offered no balance. It was a revolt. The book begins with a rejection of divine order, of angelic intervention, of heaven itself. The spirits it seeks to contact are described not as demons, not as fallen, but as alternatives, beings that dwell between the circles, neither holy nor damned, only other. The Book of Honorius maps a spiritual geography unlike anything in classical theology. Instead of heaven, hell, and earth, It describes concentric rings of reality, each governed by its own laws of time, will, and matter. The deeper the ring, the stranger the rules. Rituals are given with disturbing specificity. One requires the construction of a chamber with no right angles, wooden walls curved inward, and a ceiling painted with reversed constellations. Within that chamber, a gateway is opened, not through sacrifice or devotion, but by sound. A chant written backward, spoken over the heart of a blooded dove. In absolute darkness, the book's language is hostile. It instructs the reader to silence the voice of resistance, to reject the counsel of angels, to call only those who do not fear flesh. Who these beings are is never explained. They are called rememberers of the lost script, harbingers of function, those who speak when no one listens. The book does not offer power. It offers confrontation, a direct engagement with something older than faith, older perhaps than language itself. The Church responded with immediate condemnation. Pope Gregory XIII labeled the book a work that denies the necessity of heaven. Inquisitors who attempted to translate it fell ill or died within a year. One copy, held in a Catalonian monastery, was buried beneath the altar and sealed with lead. When uncovered during renovations in the 1800s, workers reported the smell of sulfur and flickering shadows that lingered for days. Modern editions are rare. Most are incomplete. Some occult circles claim the full text survives, passed orally in code. In the 1970s, a rumored full copy surfaced in Romania. The collector transporting it disappeared en route to Vienna. No trace of the book or the man was ever found. What separates the Book of Honorius from its contemporaries is not its darkness, but its intent. It does not seek control, salvation, or transformation. It seeks disruption. An alternative to everything we've been told is absolute, a reminder that there are voices outside the circle of Scripture. And maybe, just maybe, they've been waiting for someone to listen. What if the danger is not that these entities are evil, but that they are true? And what if all our systems of belief exist, not to protect us from them, but to keep us from remembering who spoke to us first? France, 1347. The plague had begun to spread. Cities emptied, faith fractured, and beneath the cover of night, a manuscript was smuggled out of a monastery in southern France. Not to preserve it, but to hide it. It was bound in dark red vellum, clasped with a serpent biting its own tail. Its name was Liber Seca, the sworn book of Honorius. Not to be confused with the earlier book of Honorius, this text came from a different lineage, not one of rebellion, but of demand. It did not beg the heavens. It forced them open. Where most grimoires present rituals as mystical entreaties, this book is structured like legal documents. Each invocation framed as a petition. Each rite a form of cosmic litigation. The practitioner is cast not as a supplicant, but as an advocate, invoking divine justice, even against the silence of God. Every ceremony begins with an oath, a self-binding contract, a promise that the knowledge will not be misused, and a warning that if it is, the consequences are irreversible. Each ends with the clausula exodus, a severing clause, a final line of defense if the ritual collapses. One of the most infamous rites is called Oratio Illuminandi, a prayer said to induce visions of celestial architecture. It claims to reveal the names of opening vibrational keys meant to temporarily unlock access to higher dimensions. Those who've tried and survived speak of nausea, disorientation, and bleeding from the nose and gums. In a private 1923 translation, British occultist Arthur Waite wrote, "This ritual undoes the veil between breath and meaning." He advised it never be done alone. Another section outlines the ritual of questioning the spirits, not a séance, but a tribunal. The practitioner must draw 9 concentric circles embedded with hybrid characters, combinations of Hebrew, Greek, and unknown alphabets, and summon a spirit into containment. A candle, known as the 9th lamp, must be made from resins found only in the Levant. The room must be silent, the questions prepared, and they must be spoken in reverse order. Answers may arrive in dreams, in sudden synchronicities, in sounds heard only once, but never directly. The Church feared this book more than most, not because it invited spirits, but because it claimed to overrule them. It was one of the first texts to appear on the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Catholic Church's list of banned books. Many copies were destroyed. Others went underground. Still, it circulated among Rosicrucians, alchemists, visionaries who believed reality could be negotiated. A partial copy still exists in the British Library, Sloane, MS 3853, but key chapters are missing, replaced by blank pages. In the 1960s, a controversial American theologian claimed the sworn book had been studied under CIA Project Stargate, part of an effort to explore non-ocular cognition. Official sources denied the connection, but leaked documents refer to a medieval template for perception manipulation. Its structure mirrors the book precisely. The final chapter of the sworn book is titled De Absentia Verbi, on the absence of the word. It is completely blank, except for one symbol, a circle within a square, within a triangle, all enclosed by a ring of text that reads, "He who speaks last hears nothing." Perhaps that is the most haunting aspect of this book, not what it reveals, but what it doesn't. What if knowledge could be forced from the divine? What if silence isn't a denial, but a defense mechanism? And what happens when we speak too loudly into something that was never meant to answer back? Bohemia, 1648. The 30 Years' War was nearing its brutal conclusion. Armies were broken, borders redrawn. In the chaos, Swedish forces swept through the Benedictine monastery of Brumov, seizing treasure, relics, paintings, scrolls, and one book. It was enormous, over 3 feet tall, weighing more than 160 pounds, bound in leather and reinforced with wood and iron. It took 2 men to carry. It would later be called Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. At first glance, it seemed simply ambitious. It contained the full Vulgate Bible, medical treatises, exorcism rituals, astronomical diagrams, and magical formulas, a medieval encyclopedia of belief. But then came the portrait, a single page, undivided, framed in blood-red ink. A full-length image of Satan, crouched, horned, staring out, with a calm more terrifying than rage. Not a warning, a signature. Legend says the book was written by a monk named Herman the Recluse. Facing execution for breaking his vows, he begged for a chance to atone. He promised to write a book glorifying God, the greatest manuscript ever created. He was given one night, and by morning, the Codex was complete. 624 pages, all in the same handwriting. No errors, no hesitations. Calligraphers estimate the effort would have taken at least 20 years of non-stop work. So the story changed. Herman, it was said, had made a pact, not with a scribe, but with something else. Inside the Codex, alongside scripture and saints, are strange intrusions, apocalyptic visions, invocations, in unknown alphabets, rituals involving symbols not found in any other religious or magical tradition. One section describes the binding of shadowed voices, a ritual to silence thoughts through bloodletting. Another outlines how to summon a nameless intermediary, an entity that trades clarity for loyalty. Some pages appear scorched, as if someone tried to destroy them, but stopped. The ink has been analyzed. It contains traces of arsenic, mercury, and bone ash, a toxic recipe, a deliberate one. After its seizure, the codex was moved to the Royal Library of Stockholm, where it remains, but not entirely. Several pages are missing. The official explanation is damage during transport. Unofficially, there are rumors of diagrams detailing infernal geometry, of spells that activate only when spoken in perfect harmonic resonance. In 1973, a librarian attempted to read the entire codex in a single night. He was hospitalized the next morning, speaking in a language no one could identify. He claimed he could hear the spaces between the words. His case was quietly suppressed. Access to the codex is now limited. It sits behind glass, climate-controlled, heavily monitored. Some pages, particularly those near the satanic illustration, are censored in public scans. The Vatican has requested access repeatedly. Yes, Sweden has declined, and so it remains sealed. But the question persists. What kind of book binds the holy and the heretical so closely? What kind of mind, or entity arranges scripture beside spells? Perhaps the portrait of Satan is not a metaphor. Perhaps it is authorship. If so, one has to wonder, how many other books has he written? And more chilling still, how many have we read without knowing? Paris, 1800s. In the underbelly of the city, where lamplight barely reached and cellars stretched into forgotten catacombs, whispered rumors told of a book, not stored in a library or church, hidden behind false walls, beneath altars, wrapped in myrrh-soaked cloth. Its name was always the same, the Dragon Rouge, the Red Dragon. But this version was different, older, more dangerous. Some said it wasn't merely a grimoire, but a living contract, a step-by-step guide, not to summon, but to negotiate, a business manual for binding oneself to infernal powers in exchange for dominion over the material world. It claimed authorship by Alibek the Egyptian, a shadowy figure said to have drawn from libraries long lost, perhaps even predating Alexandria. The book opened with a direct address. To Lucifer, Lord of Dominion, Master of air and wealth, I offer my service. Grant me yours. There is no poetry, no mysticism, just terms. A blood covenant is required, not symbolic. The ritual demands sigils be carved into the skin using a blade dipped in goat's blood and myrrh, while chanting a Latin phrase aligning the soul with a spirit of dominion. The text divides the infernal realm into four: Lucifer, air; Beelzebub, fire; Astaroth, water; and Orient, earth. Each spirit corresponds with specific minerals and sacrifices. The summoner must match domain to material, spirit to sound, offering to alignment. It's meticulous, it's methodical. It reads like a legal document, drafted across dimensions. Diagrams are scrawled with geometric precision, circles of command, triangles of offering, glyphs to be etched in bone dust and magnetite. There are no metaphors. Every step assumes execution. Perhaps most disturbing is the final act, the pact. The reader must draft a contract in blood, addressed directly to Lucifer. It is not poetic, it is legal, a binding clause of loyalty and obedience in exchange for worldly gain. Once written, the contract is to be burned in the flame of a black candle made from animal fat and ash from a desecrated altar. Then the practitioner must wait in darkness until the sign is given. The book does not describe the sign, only that it will be unmistakable. History records that individuals known to possess the red dragon often met strange ends, hallucinations, house fires, madness. In 1895, Parisian police discovered a copy during a raid on a theology professor turned mystic. His journal revealed he had attempted the ritual but stopped short. He heard a voice beneath the floorboards whispering his name. The Catholic Church launched multiple campaigns to eradicate the book. Some copies were burned, others vanished. Yet the manuscript re-emerged again and again in France, Italy, Haiti, New Orleans. Never the same, but always familiar. Each version altered slightly, as if rewritten not by hand, but by use. The unsettling thing is not that the red dragon offers power. It's that it offers process. It demystifies. It teaches, not in riddles or symbols, but in plain, confident language. And that may be its deepest threat, because tools don't care how they're used. They simply work. What if the most dangerous knowledge isn't hidden, but written clearly, waiting only for someone to follow the steps? And what if the moment of hesitation isn't fear, but recognition, that you already understand what to do next, and always did? Rome, early 1800s. During the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars, as treasures were seized and archives scattered, a book vanished from the Vatican Library. No record of its departure, no public acknowledgement of its loss. But its name echoed through whispered conversations among Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and secret scholars. The Grand Grimoire. A second copy, not the Genoese edition from 1750, but something older, stranger. Its leather cover bore no title, only an impression, a triangle within a circle, encased in scorched gold leaf. Inside, its pages pulsed with diagrams that felt less drawn than transmitted. Rituals written in a fusion of Latin, ciphered French, and a third language that has yet to be fully decoded. If the previous Grand Grimoire was a manual, this one was something colder, a contract with no negotiation. At its heart is a being named Lucifuge Rofacal, not Lucifer, but his emissary, a figure said to guard the treasury of hell. He does not tempt. He tallies. He obeys only when compelled with absolute precision. To summon him is not to plead. It is to transact. The rituals are exhausting in their specificity. A blade forged from meteorite iron. A triangle of containment drawn with ash from a priest's funeral robe. The practitioner must prepare over 13 consecutive nights, each night escalating in intensity. Sleep is forbidden. Failure is punished. The final stage involves the reading of the true name, a vibrational utterance recorded in reversed phonetics, meant to pierce the veil between flesh and contract. The book warns, this name should be spoken only once, ever. The practitioner must then offer blood, not as a symbol, but as currency. The offering is signed across a sigil that resembles a geometric map, a schematic of will, mapped through angles and silence. Historically, this edition of the Grand Grimoire is linked to a man named Jean-Michel Ardo, who claimed in 1932 to have completed the full summoning. He was found days later, eyes black, surrounded by ritual symbols. But what startled investigators wasn't his death, it was his journals. They included phonetic transcriptions of rituals never seen in previous editions, pages believed to have been missing for centuries, instructions for making the voice audible to forces who recognize sound before word. The Grand Grimoire does not offer protection. It offers no path to enlightenment. It does not encourage reflection, only execution. And it speaks in absolutes. There are no metaphors in its pages, only clauses. If you speak the name, you enter the contract. If you falter, you are reclaimed. Over centuries, the Church attempted to gather and destroy copies, but some were smuggled through Haiti, where they merged with Vodou practices, through Europe, where esoteric sects preserved fragments, through occult revivalists who believed the book was not evil, but misunderstood. Today, no verified complete edition exists, but phrases resurface in forums, in old notebooks, in symbols etched beneath floorboards, in abandoned buildings. What makes this book so dangerous isn't its evil, it's its confidence. It does not question whether the ritual works. It assumes it will, and that the only question is whether the practitioner survives the completion. What if the greatest fear is not summoning something malevolent, but that the universe might respond to such rituals at all? And if it does, then who or what built the rules it obeys? We've traveled through vaults and catacombs across centuries and continents, from the shadowed monasteries of Bohemia to the firelit chambers beneath Paris. 10 books, 10 thresholds, each one more than a collection of pages, each a reflection of the same haunting pattern. Humanity reaching beyond its limits, and something reaching back. They were not burned because they were nonsense. They were hidden because they spoke too clearly. Together, these manuscripts suggest a blueprint, not of chaos, but of structure, a structure built not on belief, but on precision. Rituals that function like machines, symbols that trigger effects, words that act like keys. What separates these books from myth is not their mystery, it's their consistency. The Codex Gigas, the Red Dragon, the Book of Abramelin, the Picatrix, all of them banned, suppressed, or sequestered by institutions that claimed to protect the soul. Churches, monarchies, governments. And yet, fragments survived. Whispers carried them forward, into new hands, new languages, new shapes, not because they promised power, but because they promised something far more dangerous: understanding. These books do not claim to reveal God. They do not offer salvation. They rarely even offer morality. What they offer is access to systems, to forces, to patterns that suggest the universe might not be a mystery to be worshipped, but a mechanism to be read. And if it can be read, it can be rewritten. That is the real fear. Because the greatest danger has never been what people might summon with these books. The danger is what they might realize: that the fabric of reality is not sealed, that doors open in both directions. That belief is not a shield, it is a switch. Throughout history, knowledge that reshapes perception has always been silenced first, not because it's false, but because it cannot be controlled once understood. These manuscripts are not evil. They are unsettling, because they suggest we are not alone, not in the universe, but in our own thoughts. And that language, when aligned precisely, does more than describe. It activates. The sworn book of Honorius closes with a blank page. No ending, no warning, just a symbol, a silence, and the suggestion that the final word was never meant to be written. So we are left with a question, not whether these books are real. They are. not whether they work. Some might. The question is this: why are we still being told not to read them? Because in the end, the fear isn't that we'll fall under their spell. It's that we'll understand exactly what they're saying. And once we do, we may never see the world or ourselves the same way again.